going to talk about 3 different ways here that these plants can capture prey. This right here is called a sundew, and we would refer to this as a sticky flypaper plant. This particular plant looks like a bunch of pipe cleaners sticking out of the ground. And you'll notice it kind of shines, it glistens a little bit. And what it has along the leaf, it has little tentacles with tiny drops of a sticky substance. It's like a sugar, and it's also a glue, but it also contains digestive enzymes. Now, sundews can be found everywhere on the earth, or every continent, I should say, other than the Antarctic. And we've got them up here in the Great Lakes region. They come in all different shapes and sizes. In some cases, the whole plant might fit on a dime. In other cases, you might have a leaf 2 feet long, built on similar designs. Some are round, some might be more like a sword. Tom's got a short one over here. On the end, you can take a look at a little bit later from South Africa. And some of these plants, the leaves don't move. On this one, it's like an air filter. They just sit there. Anything that flies into it gets stuck. And then that glue digests it. On some other species, the leaf has the power of movement. This one happens to be able to move. And I'll show you how this works. See, there's a real close-up of the one Tom has over here. And the leaves are just littered with these tentacles covered with this dew. Well, last summer I was in my living room and I grow some of these on the windowsill, and I heard a buzzing noise by the window, and all of a sudden the buzzing noise stopped. So I kind of knew something had happened. So I got up with my camera and I walked over, and there's a fly on the end of this sundew, and you'll see the strand right here. He's stuck and he's beginning to struggle, trying to get off. Now, every so often a large enough insect can break free, but smaller ones, that's just it for them. And the way this works is as the insect struggles, it becomes in contact with more and more of these droplets, and they begin to stick to it, coating it like a pancake syrup. And insects breathe through holes in the sides of their body, and it will eventually suffocate them. Now, in this particular sundew, it has the power of movement. It doesn't move fast. It may take several hours. But if you come back a little bit later, after a minute, he's tugging on those tentacles. And every time those tentacles bend, it sends out an electrical message into the leaf that says, dinner is here. Right? And the leaf will start this process. And the tentacles are bending in. And as they come in contact, they're depositing another drop of that glue, which also has digestive enzymes. Come back a few hours later, it's like a party favor that was blown out, and now it's wrapped back up again. Now, the plant can exert a lot of pressure. What's happening here, this insect is encased in a digestive mass. And the leaf is now squeezing it really tight. And this digestive juice gets in between the cracks of their exoskeleton, gets in their bodies, turns it into a broth. And the leaf squeezes this out. And then it comes onto the surface of the leaf and it's absorbed there like a fertilizer. Well, after about 7 to 10 days, through a process we don't fully understand, the leaf can sense, okay, no more food. And it will begin to open up again over a course of about a day. And that's what you find. Now, if you'll notice, the back end of that fly is broken out. It's like a crushed soda can or a pop can, depending on what part of the country you're from. The shell has been crushed. And this actually acts as advertising for the next meal. Because Harvey the fly is not a picky eater. And Harvey says, oh, there's where Josiah went. He goes down and takes the land right next to him, and he becomes meal number 2. And each one of these leaves can eat several insects, and then they'll just kind of wither away, and the plant will replace it with another leaf that's carnivorous over the course of a growing season. This is probably one of the most ingenious traps you'll ever see in the plant kingdom. And again, you'll see a leaf blade, and at the top of it, a modified leaf that's made into what looks like a bear trap. And it is somewhat analogous to a mouse trap. And when you look at a mouse trap, you'll see that there's a spring that has energy stored for the rapid closure. And when you pull that lever back and lock it, there's energy in that spring. That's what allows it to snap so fast. There's also bait strategically located to attract your prey. And then there's a trigger mechanism that snaps the trap shut. Now, when we look at a Venus flytrap looking through the trap, you'll notice the way the leaves have a little bit of an arc to them. They're kind of bent outwards, away from each other at the top. And this is significant because only the top third of the leaf is what snaps shuts rapidly. In that section of the leaf, there is stored energy in the cells along the upper third that allows for a rapid closure. Most folks think that the entire plant kind of closes like a hinge, and that's not actually true. The rapid closure is just the top of the plant doing this. The plant closes in a series of phases that conserves energy. It's really ingenious. And we'll show you why. Now there's where the bait is. If you look along the edge on the inside of a Venus flytrap, there are nectar glands that line the inside of that lip. And then here's where the trigger hairs are, right here. And these trigger hairs are very ingenious. If you take one of these trigger hairs and bend it, at the very base of the hair there are cells that act like pressure sensors. So when the hair is bent, that little sensor sends an electrical message out to the leaf, and it sits there for 20 seconds, but the leaf doesn't close. It just goes on red alert. If that hair or any of the other 5 hairs is touched in that 20-second span and bends, another electrical message goes out, and the top of the leaf flaps over in half a second. Now you might say, why is that significant? Now think of this. This is a plant. In order for a plant to move rapidly, it has to expend a lot of energy. And by requiring 2 touches, it kind of raises the stakes that something is moving in the track. Otherwise, on a windy day, you might have a leaf blow through there and hit one of those trigger hairs, and the track would waste energy closing. But the 2 touches kind of says, hey, something's moving around in here. So here's what the plant wants to happen. It wants a fly to come along and start working its way along that nectar trail, and now it's heading for the trigger hairs. Now, how many of you have ever seen a Venus flytrap close? Okay, not very many. What I'm going to show you next is actual footage in real time of a Venus flytrap closing on a horsefly that I'm feeding it. Now you can see he's kicking and screaming right now. That wasn't worth the quarter I paid him. Whack. Let's see if we can bring that one back and we'll show it again. All right, give you another shot. I've been looking at this for over 40 years. I never get bored of it. When you think of what you just saw, that is cabbage reshaped into a sophisticated trapping mechanism. And in half a second, it just snaps shut on a fly. Now take notice of the way those bristles have interlocked. They're horizontal to each other at this point, and they act like prison bars to hold whatever was in there inside. Now think of this. If I had just tricked that plant shut, let's suppose I put the tweezer in there empty and I hit 2 trigger hairs and the plant snaps shut. That upper third of the leaf pops over. If there's no food in there, the plant doesn't waste any more energy. It stops right here. And over the next 24 hours, it'll reset itself for another try. Now, if there's an insect in there, especially a fly, 2 things happen. How many of you are aware of this, that when a fly gets scared, it pees itself? That they do. So the fly is in there right now. He has just wet himself pretty good. Ooh, brother, what just happened? And that gives off urea. And we believe that the Venus flytrap can sense urea through the cells in the inside. And that says the dinner bell starts ringing. There's something in here. And then this insect is scurrying around, figuring, I gotta get out of here. And it's bending those trigger hairs. And that tells the trap to expend more energy and continue the closing process. So the very first part you just saw took a half a second. Now it'll begin to go through 2 or 3 more phases. And I say 2 or 3 because if you read other books, they'll tell you there's several phases. I go with 3 phases is plenty. So the next phase, and this could take place all in a half hour now, depending on a good warm day, in a half hour this will be finished. Those bristles begin to stand up. And what's happening, the sides are coming in and the bristles stand up. So imagine I take my hand and I bend over just at my knuckles and my fingers are now horizontal. If I bring my palms together, my fingers begin to stand up. That's exactly what's happening here. The insect would be kind of like right where your palm is, and right along where the inside of your knuckles are coming together very tightly. So the insect begins to get squeezed and the plant begins to dump digestive juices onto the insect. By the time, maybe an hour tops on a good day is done, the bristles are standing straight up, vertical. And then you see here, this is a very, very tight seal. And now there's juices in here, and they don't leak out very easily. This plant closes very, very tightly. And what we have going on is a bug soup. And again, if you were to peel the leaf open, you would see a liquid in there all around this insect. And again, what it's doing, it's penetrating through the areas of their exoskeleton, getting inside, turning it into a broth, and then the leaf is squeezing like crazy to get that broth out, and you end up with a plant stomach. And again, this nutritious broth is then sent down through the leaf blade into the root system, and that gets used in the following season to make little Venus flytraps. Well, after about 7 to 10 days, again, we don't fully understand how this works, but just like with the sundew, when the leaf has expended all of whatever it can eat, somehow it's time to reset ourselves. So it takes about a day to reopen, and you might see something like this. Now, do you notice anything interesting about the fly's eyes? They look like crushed paper bags. And there's a reason for that. The fly is absolutely hollow at this point. So if you take it out and snap it open, you can look right through it. Because everything inside was liquefied and squeezed out, and the plant has absorbed it. Well, I get this question on what happens to the insects that are left in the trap? Well, if you read books, they'll tell you the rain or the wind washes it out. No, they don't. That's not true. Many times, the insect is glued right there on the leaf. And here's a good example of this is a box elder bug. And he's glued right there where he was eating. And here comes old Harvey the fly. Comes along, smells that. You see Harvey's eye right there? This was the first course, and there was the second. The fly became the second meal. Now this is significant. As you mentioned, this is leaf material. It has a limited number of closings. So if you put an insect in a Venus flytrap on week one, it'll eat it, it'll open. You might have that shell there. You put a second insect in there. It can do this up to 3 times. Each leaf has a maximum of 3 meals it can consume. After that point, that particular leaf will turn black and wither away, and the plant will put up new traps throughout the growing season. All right, let's move on to the real, I call these the gluttons of the carnivorous plant world. These are the pitcher plants. And specifically, these are the trumpet pitcher plants. And it's pretty cool that Tom has a trumpet up here, because what you see in front of you is kind of like this. It's a plant that's stuck into a pot. And the only difference is my plants have a little bit of a lid over the top that helps keep rainwater out in this particular variety. Now these all grow what you see right here on the eastern seaboard. They start from about eastern Texas, and they come through the Florida Panhandle and go up the East Coast. This particular variety, and there's another one that I don't have with me today that actually grows up into the Great Lakes region into Canada. But these trumpet pitchers are absolutely ravenous pigs when it comes to insects. And they're very simple. It's just a non-moving leaf shaped like a tube, and I'll show you how this works. On top of the lid, there are nectar glands all around the edge. And those nectar glands will attract the flying insect to come in for a drink. Well, if you look up the front of the tube, there's more nectar glands that start at the bottom, and they get thicker as you get up towards the opening. So whether an insect flies in for the weekend or comes in through the highway, the plant wants to lure that insect into this particular region right here. Well, that's the danger zone. And what makes this fascinating is the cells that make that area are like little shark's teeth. They're shaped like triangles, and they're overlapped like roof shingles, and they're lubricated with the nectar. And there's these little downward pointing hairs all through them as well. So everything is stacked so that an insect's foot pads have a hard time getting a grip on this. And to make matters worse, on this particular one, there's a narcotic in the nectar that's extremely powerful on this particular plant. And all the plants have this type of a narcotic to different degrees of potency. This particular plant here is called Alata, and I call her, she is the assassin of the carnivorous plants. And let me show you how this works. I caught this fly, and I let it sniff the nectar just for 2 seconds and let go of it. It doesn't fly away. Look at that. And here it goes. It's feeding like a kid on a chocolate cone on a hot Sunday. Goodbye. Less than 5 seconds. Try that again. There we go. Now watch, all I did is I held it up so it got a whiff of the nectar for about a 2 count. 1, 2, and then I let go of it. Now it just peed all over my fingers, by the way. But there it starts feeding on that nectar. You can see it's already losing its footing. It keeps feeding as it's falling to its doom. Well, where did it go? Why didn't it just fly out again? Now that's about a 20-inch tall pitcher, and it's filled to within 2 inches of the top. It's not uncommon on a good summer week to have these things fill right to the top to where other insects can land and walk straight across the others. And, well, remember, they go out in very sunny areas. So these tubes become like little convection ovens. It gets very hot in there. And those walls are slippery. They can't get a grip. And bigger insects, they can't open their wings to fly. And even the ones that can fly, think of this. In order to go up, I have to send a jet of air down. Well, the air that goes down sucks air in through the top. So essentially, they hold themselves static. The harder they try to fly up, the more air they suck into the top. And they'll just sit there. This could go on for hours. Now, here's one of those driller bumblebees. And you'll get a good idea. Here he is down deep in there. You'll see it's like he's walking up ice. He's gaining no headway here. This was a big bee. I'm glad he couldn't get out. That can go on sometimes for several hours. The insect will just expend all of its energy stores and slide to the bottom. Or on a hot summer day, the heat gets to it. Or another one falls on top of it, and that one loses its footing, and he goes all the way to the bottom. And that you can see that happen time after time with these plants. Well, here's the point in the talk where everybody has a fascination with, CSI Miami, CSI, Nebraska, whatever. And so I asked this question: who wants to see an autopsy photo? All right, and I have to throw a disclaimer out. You still want to see it? All right, good. All right, good. All right. This is a tall pitcher plant that I've sliced open at the end of the season so you can see what's inside of it. And that's the partially dissolved remains of all the insect that it has captured throughout the course of its summer feeding. And again, all the energy has gone down the roots of those minerals that it's gotten, go down to the root system so the next year it can make little pitcher plants. And they will just dissolve and fall over onto the ground. And sometimes that releases a little bit of nutrients to this already nutrient-deficient soil. Well, we'll finish up with what I call the heavy artillery of the carnivorous plant world. In fact, Tom has two little varieties right here. These are called Nepenthes. Now, these are tropical. We find these in the Philippines and Borneo and Madagascar and that region of the world. And they hang on vines. They can kind of grow on the side of trees. And what they look like is, like a big mug hanging on a vine. And believe it or not, the size on the screen would be accurate to that particular plant right there. Now, some of these can be as small as a thimble, as large as a 2-liter pot. So just to give you some scale, that's my teenage daughter's forearm right there, and here's the bottom of this picture, and there's the opening. She could have put her arm in this just past her elbow. It's a big pitcher. And again, the lip around this particular area has varying degrees of potency, like a nectar. And there's 90 species of these. Some of it's very strong, and some that it's not as strong. But I've seen certain of these plants where ants will crawl up on them and take one quick drink and get paralyzed and fall in by the hundreds. These are the ones that are well capable of consuming mice and lizards, and in some cases, we know little small monkeys have been found. And again, that's not their primary diet, but if one of these animals goes to the plant, because inside it has a water solution that it has pumped in there itself with some digestive enzymes, and the animal goes looking to get a drink. But what makes this so interesting is the lid, or the lip. Now, on some of these plants, it's kind of like a serrated steak knife, very sharp like rose thorns. Now, it serves two purposes. If a small insect, like an ant, crawls to the end of this, they'll lose their footing and fall into the water bath. Now, if a larger prey, like a mouse, falls into this, they've got to get past this to get out. And it's like rose thorns. Now, look at this one. This had what looked like fangs hanging down. Two sharp protrusions under the lid that were kind of like, Christ had the crown of thorns, kind of like that. They were about an inch long and a larger variety, and very sharp. So again, you'll notice under the lid, you've got this nectar. So again, smaller prey like an ant might crawl down and then slip and fall in. But what if larger prey goes in like a rat? It's got to jump out with these spikes poking it right in the face. This is called a hamata. Again, on the lip on this particular plant, they're like sharp cat's claws all pointing downward around the edge. Same idea, smaller prey like ants will crawl to the edge of that, slip and fall in, but imagine, you get a rodent goes into this plant, it has to get past that. In fact, if you go to the zoo and you see a bear enclosure, a lot of times around the bear enclosure they put metal spikes that are shaped just like this to keep bears from getting out over the top of it. Pretty barbaric when you think about it. Well, what do we learn from these plants? One thing, especially when I look at a Venus flytrap, the plant absolutely screams design.